It is a pleasure to be here. Wondering.
So I'm going to brag on all three of these therapists as people are coming in. Each one of them had clients all the way up until right now, tonight. So they have been busy folks today.
I am going to brag on myself as well.
Good. Yeah, we're so thankful that y'all are taking time. I know there's a lot going on right now and a lot of people who need help. So
Let me know if this is dark.
what?
You're good, Max. I can see you.
Okay, I didn't know. My square halo above my head right there. I didn't know if that was really. So anyway. No one's looking at me anyway. Supposed to be looking at the slides. I'm sorry. I interrupted you, Brittany. Go ahead. I apologize.
Oh, you're fine. No, I was just say I love doing these types of things. I feel like, it gives us an opportunity to, hear from other people and also to share in a different way. So, I love working with clients, but I also love doing this. So I think both are really important.
Yes.
I also have a dog behind me, so I'll warn people, but as a warning, if she jumps up or something.
It'll be bonus, just bonus.
Yeah.
Footage.
Bonus home working footage.
Yeah. So Lori, have I run into you at the church recently and I just didn't know it because you had a mask on? Have we said, I've said hi to so many people. I don't really know who I'm saying hi to.
I've been there, but I don't think we haven't seen each other in a while.
Okay.
No.
I haven't memorized everyone's eyebrows yet. I'm sorry.
That's okay. No, I'm usually there on Mondays and Wednesdays for a while.
Mondays, that's my day. Yeah, I'm there. That is one of my days that I'm there. So, yeah.
You're not having any meetings in the church, though, are you, Lori?
No, no large gatherings. No, I sometimes will meet with one person in a large space, but otherwise, no.
But our group will have to wait.
Yes, large groups. We're kind of working on what that's all going to look like with the numbers being so high right now.
Yep.
We'll wait just another minute and then we will try to start pretty much on time and so that we can make sure we're honoring everyone's time tonight. It's good to see everybody. I know you might have to scroll through the photos to see folks that are here, but thank y'all for being here. I'm sure some more folks will come in. It is 7 o'clock. And so I'll just go ahead and say a brief word of opening and then, or we can, do y'all want to wait a few minutes, Brittany and Max?
No, is Madeline here?
She's not here yet, I don't think.
Okay. Wasn't she starting us off? I don't know. I don't know who was.
No, I am. You're good.
Oh, okay.
It's me, Madeline, you.
Okay.
Very good. Well, then
I think we're okay starting if we want to. I mean, we can let her come in. If she had a client, there might have been a little bit of a hold up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'll just go ahead and start. Hey, everyone. I'm Lori. I'm one of the pastors at Johns Creek United Methodist, and I am just so grateful to Madeline and Max and Brittany for being here and for walking us through some of these topics and really helping us start the new year off well and be able to handle and work through grief and loss and pain, because the last year has been very difficult. We all know that. I'm not going to spend much time talking because I want them to have a lot of time to share. I will say that if you have questions, there will be time at the end for questions. And if you want to type those into the chat, then I will be looking at that. And then at the end, I can read those questions because it can be hard when there are a lot of people on a call to see people trying to ask questions. So type them in the chat, and then when we get to the time for questions, then I can read those off, if that's okay with everybody. But with that said, I don't want to take up too much time. So Brittany, if you want to go ahead and jump in, that'd be great.
Yeah, I can definitely do that. Hey everyone, I'm excited to get to talk with you guys, and I know that this can be a difficult topic, just to say like, hey, let's acknowledge what has been happening, and I also am just appreciative that we get to talk about it together. So my name's Brittany Glazer. I am a Summit staff therapist, and I have been at Johns Creek as one of my sites for the past 4 years, almost 5 years. I really love being a part of y'all's community, and it's just a really great part of my job getting to work with y'all. And I work with high schoolers and adults and do a lot of grief and depression, anxiety things, and I'm happy to answer questions about their stuff. And I said it earlier, but just in case you didn't come, and if you're watching me talk and you see something huge moving in the background, it's my dog, so just warning. Okay, and I was like, Madeline will be coming, so maybe we will.
I'm here.
Oh, good. Okay, I'll let you introduce yourself then.
That sounds good. Yes, thank you. I just finished with a client. So my name is Madeline Chirella. I am a licensed associate professional counselor with Summit, of course. I am mainly at Johns Creek High School and Autry Mill Middle School, but obviously work at Johns Creek too. I'm actually here at our office in the church right now. I'm new to the Johns Creek location. I was previously in the Dunwoody location, working with different population, but so far the warm welcome here. I've really enjoyed working with everyone and meeting some new people around the church so far. So my specialty, definitely work with adults, but mainly right now working with middle school, high school, and some college students. I'm most passionate about working with people who struggle with trauma, with grief, depression, and anxiety, and some self-worth issues as well. I work with a lot of different people, but those probably are my most passionate clients I'm working with right now. So yes, is there anything else I need to share that you can think of? Okay, awesome, thank you.
That was great.
I was kind of hoping I'd get to introduce you. I had a whole scenario and a story about how you rescued us from a plane, we had to survive in the wilderness and all that stuff. So. Amazing survival skills Madeline has. So. Max Merritt, I've been told that I have humor. I keep it in my wallet. Sometimes I take it out from time to time and share it with other people. I've been at the Johns Creek office for about a year, I would say. And it's been I've said this to I really appreciate all the help and just the welcome that everybody at the church has shown. It's been really great to be there and be a part, and I'm glad that we could be here tonight to do this. I'm also a licensed associate professional counselor, soon to be fully licensed in this year, 2021. So I'm looking forward to that. I've worked with a lot of young people. I've worked with as young as 5 up to 75, worked with a lot of different age groups, a lot of different issues, and worked with a lot of kids with ADHD and high functioning autism, as well as kids with depression, anxiety. Try to help. Done a little family counseling, marital counseling, career counseling. I've done a little bit of everything. So, but I really like working with the school age people, but as well as like working with couples. I've done. That's kind of an interesting little mix there. It's like I'd like doing marital counseling as well as working with kids, and I've done a little family counseling as well. So I've had a pretty good experience since I've been a counselor, working with a lot of different populations, and everything. So I just love what I do, and I just want to help people as much as I can. So so that's kind of a little bit about me. I'll kick it back to Brittany and let her take it from there.
Cool. Thanks, you guys. So Lori already did this, so I don't have to say it. But if you have questions, put them in the chat box. I know Lori's looking. I'll try to look too. So if it's urgent, I can pause. But we'll definitely try to come to those at the end. Okay, so this is just kind of an outline because I am a visual person. So how we're gonna go through this is I'm gonna kind of get us started with just kind of talking about this past year. I wanna give us some space to normalize just what it's been like. And I know that it's been different for each of us. And then I'm gonna talk a little bit about, how this could be, some trauma response to the past year and how as a, nation and as a world, we've experienced some of that this past year. So kind of talking through that and what that looks like. And then Madeline's going to pick us up on talking about grief and kind of grieving well, kind of defining what that looks like. And then Max is going to round us out by talking about self-care and coping and bringing in some spiritual resources as well. Okay. So loss in 2020, what does that look like? So I feel like, I will just say personally, as I think about this past year, I feel like there are so many images that come up, and I know that we'll be talking about that, but I think I had this moment, maybe it was last week or the week before, when I had gotten like my baby in the car, and like we were like, I'm gonna go to the grocery store, and like that kind of, here we go. And I driven to the grocery store after all the process of strollering and all that, and realized like, oh, I don't have a mask in my car. And this like just realization of like, I can't do anything. And so having to like go back to my house and grab a mask, and just having this surreal experience of like, so much of my life has changed. And so much of all of our lives have changed. And there are all those moments, and I'm sure all of us have, of, oh, like, what am I going to do without a mask? Or, I need to remember to stand on this line in the store and then wait until that person's passed this line. There are so many things that are small that have changed so much. And so I just wanted to kind of acknowledge that, and that there are little losses in there too. Okay, and so I'll move on to our next one. I am, I think we all are. I prefer like kind of going back and forth. So I wanted to take a moment as I start to, give each of us a second and maybe a few minutes to think about 2020 in 3 words. So if you guys want to share that in the chat, I'm going to look at it. But if you don't want to, it can be a personal thing for you. And I stole this from the Washington Post, asked all their readers to do that. So I'll share kind of the ones that came out for them. There's the article link if you want to go in there. But just take a few minutes. If you want to put it in the chat, you can. You don't have to. What is 2020 in 3 words? So some things I'm seeing on here, I'll just kind of read out, challenging, scary, memorable, loss of freedom. Yeah, I can relate to those. Cautious, restless, still. Yeah. I'll give you guys about 1 more minute. Okay. Yeah, isolation, hope, and scary. Okay, I'm gonna let you guys, obviously this is, oh, sorry, thanks for adding that. Um, okay, we got joy, hope, and loss. Yeah. I'm so sorry, you probably hear my baby not wanting to go to bed behind me, so sorry, we gotta love the working from home life. So I appreciate you guys sharing, and if you didn't, like, I appreciate you engaging in that in whatever way you did. And what they came up with as they kind of culminated all the responses they got from the Washington Post was the top 3 words were exhausting, lost, and chaotic. And I, related to those, and I also can relate to the things you guys have said. Oh yeah, and there's the link there. And so if you guys are kind of looking through and want to look through this, there's like a lot of other responses people put. Like, one of them was a year that like felt like a TV show I couldn't turn off. And so there were some like very descriptive things in there that I could relate to too. Yeah. So feel free to look through that. And you can see in there that like the other thing that they put was kind of like put some things you're hoping for. So I want to hold that space too and give you guys time just to think about that. I won't ask for responses now, but you can come back and think about it too. Yeah, I'll do that after we're done too. I can definitely add that in. Thank you for asking. Okay, so I'm gonna go on next. And this is just kind of, you guys already mentioned a lot of this, but here's some categories that I thought of when I was thinking about 2020 and loss. So like the first category that I thought of is just actual loss. Like we have lost so many people this year. And I know that that's impacted me personally. I can imagine that we all have, ways that that's hit us in different ways, whether that's, actual, losing people we care about or losing people we know, or the fear of losing people we know. And that kind of goes into that fear. Like there's been so much unknown and so much, fear of what could be. There's been a lot of isolation, like someone mentioned. And I think that hits each of us in different ways. Like, for some people and vulnerable people groups, it's been like, I am completely isolated for this whole period and can't leave my house. For some people, it's been, navigating, I have to do work from home and I have to do school from home and I feel like I've lost all my friends. There's also been a lot of division in 2020 that has to do with COVID and also doesn't have to do with COVID. And so I just wanted to point that out too, that like in the midst of the stress that has come with, isolation, loss, and fear with this disease, there's also been feelings of division and isolation and unrest that have happened just with being, part of our country right now. So I'm going to keep going through. So introducing all this, I wanted to just normalize that we are all in the span where, we have experienced this year. And I wanted to bring up the possibility of, having some trauma around this past year. And just take a second to define that and see if that's something that maybe we relate to. And so according to the American Psychological Association, trauma is an emotional response to a terrible event like an accident, a tragedy, or a natural disaster. So I think that's what we usually, kind of think of. Like I know when I think about trauma, sometimes I tend towards this like kind of big T, which I'll define, but, big T trauma, big events that are life-threatening. And there are also a lot of different types. So there's, acute trauma, like you kind of feel trauma from like a single stressful or dangerous event. There's chronic trauma where, like you have repeated and prolonged exposure to stressful events. That could be like a bullying or domestic violence, or any situation where you repeatedly are being exposed to something that's stressful and life-threatening, which, I think in some ways can relate to what we've been through this year. There's also complex trauma where you're being exposed to multiple traumatic events at once. And I put kind of the, capitalized T trauma versus lowercase t trauma here too. So, I think, as I said, like big T, capitalized T trauma are those kind of like extraordinary, like big moments that you kind of think of, this was life-threatening. This was a huge car crash. This was like an experience in battlefield, life-threatening events that can be very traumatic. There are also like, smaller t, like lowercase trauma events that, events that might not be as dramatic in the moment, but they, kind of make us feel hopeless and maybe like more, ego threatening, like threatening our sense of self, our sense of ability to cope. So those can also be, experienced as trauma. And, when we're looking at all these different types of trauma, a lot of times, the difference in how we experience that is based on our perspective. So, me and Max might be in the same car crash, where for me, I start to experience that as like a very huge traumatic event, and I start having PTSD symptoms. And for Max, like his perspective was that it wasn't as life-threatening. Maybe that wasn't the same experience for him. He doesn't have the same, background I do. And for him, maybe that's like a very stressful, acute event, but he doesn't end up having the same symptoms. It's very different based on our perspective, which I think can be important when we think about, hey, as a nation, as a world, we're in the midst of this, but each of us can have our own response based on our perspective. And something I wanted to address in that too is I put media impact. This is something I talk about a lot with my clients. I don't know if you guys do too, but there's been a lot of research on how media exposure during, traumatic, like I keep saying trauma, but during, acutely stressful events or violent events, natural disasters, war, things like 9/11, things like this crisis. There's been research that shows that how we are exposed to media can actually increase our stress response and increase our, experience of trauma symptoms. And so there was some research that showed, and I'm just going to read this so I don't mess up the fact, but, like, for example, several hours of daily television exposure in the days after 9/11 was associated with increased post-traumatic stress and new onset physical health symptoms 2 to 3 years later. So there is a lot of association with, like how we, experience news around these events that could be happening and the symptoms that we feel afterwards. And I feel like that's a lot of, because this has been a year where there's so much uncertainty in news, that's just, something to be thinking about too. Okay, I'm gonna keep going, so I'm paying sensitive time. I'll skip to the next slide. So just some symptoms of trauma to be looking out for. I feel like, okay, I don't know if this is something I relate to, or I don't know if I would even, feel like this has been a traumatic year. So some emotional symptoms would be, denial, anger, fear, sadness, shame, confusion, anxiety, depression, numbness, guilt, hopelessness, irritability, and difficulty concentrating. Those also are very similar with grief symptoms. So I'm sure, like, Madeline can talk about like how that kind of weaves together, because in this loss and trauma, there's grief. And then, some physical symptoms that we can have are headaches, troubles with digestion, fatigue, racing heart, sweaty and jumpy. So kind of that hypervigilance. And, when we experience, feelings or events that feel life-threatening or, world-threatening, like how we see the world, how we see ourselves, that can also, impact our spirituality. Like we can have, symptoms that come in that where we start to question our spirituality or feel lost in our spirituality. And so those can be symptoms to look forward to, like feelings of hopelessness, disconnect, struggling to make meaning. And those are things that we can see there. So I will kind of shift and let Madeline talk about grief, which is, I know very similar in some ways. And if you guys have questions about that, feel free to add them in and we'll come back to them.
Thank you, Brittany. So yes, grief is a whole nother, kind of monster sometimes too. We have loss, which is kind of one step, and then what happens after the loss oftentimes is this grief. So the definition that I was able to find from the American Psychological Association just defines grief as the anguish experienced after significant loss. Oftentimes it's the death of a beloved person. But I also always like to remind my clients that loss means a lot of different things, like Brittany already talked about too. You know, grieving a loss, especially after 2020 and what we're still going through, means the loss of sometimes part of yourself, and some of like the normal, what used to be our normal, you know, ways of interacting and going about our lives. Also the loss of just seeing and interacting with other people. And so even though we're not losing a person, it still feels like we're losing a person. It still feels like sometimes even like we're losing a community, even though we know the community is still there. You know, when obviously community that you guys have in common is here at the church. And so that's wonderful that you guys are still able to be connected. But yeah, grief is a lot of different things. So I'm going to go into a little bit more detail about what grief can look like, because it looks like so many different things for each person. So it is a little bit different than bereavement and mourning, where those are kind of the states of like processes of grief, I should say, and like phases of your life. So yes, like I didn't put this right here, but the way grief can also affect us, obviously emotionally. I think that that's a big one that's probably most people think of when they realize, okay, am I grieving? Okay, yes, I'm feeling sad. It's feeling heavy. It's feeling overwhelming. But the thing I also like to remind people is that when we are experiencing emotional distress, that directly affects our physical health as well. And so people start to notice, like, okay, you know, maybe I'm having a harder time breathing sometimes, like it affects our ability to breathe, or I'm getting anxious a lot more, or sometimes it can be even as debilitating, it's hard to get out of bed. And so that's something that I always like to remind people. And it kind of goes on right here too with some of that confusion and other worrying about the future. I think all of that goes together, which is very difficult for some people sometimes when they interconnect a lot. It's sometimes scary to try to figure out what in the cycle has caused what. For example, like the loss has caused grief, which has caused anxiety, which has caused depression, and those can kind of fuel each other sometimes. So more than anything, and I'll go into this a little bit more in the next slide, but more than anything, it is so important to make sure that you're still you're taking inventory and you're checking in with yourself, and you're paying attention to what you're feeling and where you're feeling it, because once you do, you're able to identify. The next piece is a little bit of identifying what you need and how to take care of yourself. But I'll pause there because I'll get to that in a little bit. So yes, the other thing too that I want to mention here is intense grief. So that is when we don't take care of ourselves and we don't take care of our grief and our feelings that come up from that. It can become, like I was saying before, it can become so intense where it is affecting our physical health, immune system. We start to neglect ourselves a little bit more. Sometimes even having thoughts of, if I weren't here anymore, that I wouldn't be feeling that way. And that's terrifying. But that's also, for some people, a normal part of the process. So I wanted to make sure I included that too. Whatever you're feeling from that is normal, and that is something that you're absolutely allowed to feel. So yeah, any questions on that so far? Like everyone's been saying, make sure that you put that in the chat down below. So we'll go on to the next slide here. So processing grief. Okay, so I wanted to first go into a little bit more about the different types of grief. So as it says here, kind of like what Brittany was going over with types of loss, we have acute, complicated, and integrated grief. So acute grief is often that those feelings that you have immediately after a loss. And sometimes it can even happen for months afterwards. And what that looks like is sometimes shock, sadness, difficulty eating or sleeping, even difficulty concentrating sometimes. The good thing that I always like to remind people is that these symptoms will slowly diminish with the passage of time, but that's the hard part, is letting that time pass and letting yourself experience all of those things. Complicated grief. So this one, sometimes the symptoms of that acute grief never seem to go away. The loss of that loved one just continues to feel like not real, and it's difficult to manage. And so moving on or accepting the loss feels impossible. So that's kind of that complicated grief that I was mentioning before, that if you don't take care of your feelings and you don't take care of yourself when those feelings and thoughts come up, then it can grow into something that is harder to take care of. Not impossible, it's absolutely possible. It just takes a little bit more energy. And so then the integrated grief. So after resolving some of the more intense symptoms of grief that we mentioned before, you kind of enter that lifelong stage of grief. And I think that's something that all of us have experienced in one way or the other, where we have to find out where this grief plays a role in our lives without not being so active. For example, if we've lost a grandparent or a parent or a friend even, years down the line, our heart still aches and our heart still hurts when we think about that person and what role they played in our lives. But it's not so strong anymore. We still, instead of having those sadness come in so much, it's more of like those happy memories can come in, and those happy reminders of that person come in. You let yourself feel those good emotions, or those positive emotions as well. So yeah, those are the general types of grief, and they don't go in any certain order. You don't even have to experience all of them. That's the thing too, is each person is a little bit unique. So stages of grief too, same thing applies there. So these are the 5 most researched and studied stages of grief, but I'll give you a little bit of an asterisk here, where these aren't the only stages of grief for every single person, and you do not have to go in them in a particular order. So we'll go over them very briefly. So denial, I think that one's pretty straightforward, just having a hard time accepting the fact that the loss has occurred, and that's a really difficult one to I think it's a blocker and it's a protective factor. Then the next one here is anger. That one makes sense too, absolutely. So we get very frustrated sometimes when we do lose the loved one, because the control has been taken from our hands. It's been taken from us, that we couldn't help this person out, or we couldn't save them for any reason. And that comes out in a lot of different ways. Bargaining is also one of those. I think that's something that a lot of people kind of have that conversation with themselves, with their loved ones, with God, even, of just really having a hard time and wanting to change it and not being able to do anything, and wanting to do anything that you can to change that fact. Depression, I think that's one of the more common reactions as well after part of grief and after loss, is just that overwhelming sadness, and feels so heavy on our shoulders and on our chest and on our hearts sometimes. And then we get to the acceptance. So the acceptance part is, again, not saying that it's okay what happened, that you're okay with what happened. It's just the fact that you understand logically and that you've come to terms emotionally with the situation. And that's where typically that integrated grief comes into play too, where you've figured out how those two relate and come together, and how that's gonna just look a little bit different in your life from now on. So yes, so that's a very general overview. Thank you. So then we go over to, yes, adjustments and remembrance. Okay, so this is the part where, again, after we check in with ourselves, let ourselves naturally go through the stages that we need to go through on your own or with the group, but in yourself. Then we have to figure out how to adjust our daily lives in a little bit of a different way. So the adjustments here that I put, internal adjustments, all right? So that's something that a lot of our emotions mainly go around with that one, and knowing that person is not physically part of our lives anymore, that changes things internally in us sometimes. Externally, so this one is more of those daily tasks and roles. So what we're doing, if we were doing something for these people or if they were helping us, the roles might switch a little bit, where who we're relying on and how we're doing day to day or week to week or month to month tasks. And different skills too. Sometimes people have others to rely on to help them out with certain things, and they have to adjust by learning these new skills, and that can be very difficult. And then faith too. So having those conversations with God and figuring out just what this new loss and what that's going to look like in your life moving forward, and reflecting on that and finding what works best for you. That's the big thing there. Is I can't speak so specifically because what would work for you might work different for another person. You have to allow yourself to explore and figure out what you need. And of course, remembrance. So that is a big part of that integrated grief that I was mentioning before, and that acceptance part is finding a way that we can still remember and honor our loved ones that we did lose. So for example, staying connected to their memory or impact. For some people, like if there was one thing that person was very passionate about and very excited about, maybe spending some of your time and energy in honoring their memory moving forward, making a lasting impact. Talking about them. It's hard at first. I cannot tell you how hard it is. Or maybe you understand how hard it is at first, but the more you talk about them, the more that they become a part of you internally as much as they were externally. And journaling, do not discount the impact of writing things down for yourself and writing those special memories down, or keeping those pictures around, whatever that might look like for you. And actions with family and around holidays and anniversaries of the passing or of the loss. So keep in mind too, that is going to look different each year, and with each holiday and anniversary that happens. Give yourself some grace, give yourself some understanding and kindness during those times, because it is going to be different. And that's a hard thing to accept, but there are still things that you can do during those times to take care of yourself, and to either keep traditions and holidays alive, or form some new traditions that might be part of integrating that person's spirit and self. But yeah, especially around those anniversaries and holidays, make sure that you're doing some extra taking care of yourself and surrounding yourself by loved ones and community. So we'll go to the next slide here. And I know that Max is going to be sharing some great things with us in a little bit here too, but I wanted to pull some of my favorite scriptures that relate directly to grieving. So the first one we have is, "My soul melts away for sorrow, strengthen me according to your word." So I'll just read through these and you can write them down as you need. We have John 16:22. "So you have pain now, but I will see you again, and your hearts will rejoice, and no one will take your joy from you." I like that one now because, again, it reminds us that our pain is not forever, and that can be a really helpful reminder. And then Matthew 11:28, "Come to me, all that you are weary and are carrying heavy burdens, and I will give you rest." So reminding that no matter what you go through, you know that you'll always have a place of peace, a place of rest, a place of comfort, whatever that looks like for you. So yeah, I know that Max is going to talk a little bit more. I know that was some of the darker, heavier stuff, but Max is going to talk also about moving forward. So I'll lead it over to you, Max.
Thank you, Madeline. I appreciate that. As I was contemplating my part of our presentation, talking about self-care, I kind of wanted to just kind of talk a little bit about perseverance and resiliency. I could talk a lot about different things that we can do that are what I refer to as me things. I don't know if you can see, I'm doing air quotes, but are, things that are unique to us, things that are unique to our interests, things that we can do during isolation, during, especially during the start of this. We kind of had to find ways to keep ourselves entertained, keep ourselves busy. Some people learned a new language. Some people practiced an instrument, tried new things that they had been putting off because now they had a little extra time. They were looking for things that maybe to challenge themselves in certain ways. I may get into that a little bit, but I'm willing to bet at this point, since the start of the pandemic, I'm willing to bet that a number of us have discovered some new things that are now a part of us. We've tried some new things. And maybe we have a few things that we still haven't been able to do yet, but they're still on our list of things to do. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that, but I really wanted to kind of key in on perseverance and resiliency. At the beginning of the school year, that was kind of a topic for those of us in the school-based program to talk about how to build up perseverance and resiliency in students who were going into, different, some were in face-to-face school. Most were virtual at the start of the semester. And a lot of kids that I saw, but at around September, they were over it. They were done. They wanted life to be back to normal. We had to work on how to persevere through this new particular struggle. So perseverance, is defined by, a steady persistence in a course of action. It can be a purpose, either a purpose that you have or a state of being, especially in spite of difficulties, obstacles, or discouragement. I kind of think of it as it's a determination. It starts with a choice that we have. That we're just not going to let this defeat us. And so I kind of want to, I'm not going to take any more time, but I want you to reflect on the fact that here we are. Some jaded people may look, well, there's nothing different between, December 31st and January 1. There's nothing really different between 2020 and 2021. We're still kind of dealing with some of the same stuff. But I always kind of look at the new year is a very symbolic thing. And so a lot of people may look at 2020 and say, thank goodness that's over, looking forward. And so we're not going to look back at 2020, but just for a second, just to kind of ponder for a moment, like, you're still here. Everybody that's in this chat room, everybody that we interact with, and yes, I'm fully aware that some of you might have lost somebody. You're here and somebody isn't. And I want you to understand I'm saying this with the utmost sensitivity. And I don't want to make light of your loss, but take a minute and recognize that you have persevered through 2020. We have persevered to this point. We got through, yes, it might be largely symbolic, but we got through 2020. And we can look forward to 2021 with maybe a different sense of hope. Maybe we've discovered new talents that we didn't have before. Maybe we've discovered new things that we've started projects, we've started businesses. Maybe we've done some things. Maybe some of you have gone through losses, but and it's tragic and terrible, but you're still here. You had a steady persistence, whatever it was that kept you going. When you're feeling isolated, when you're feeling lonely, when you're feeling like, worried that you might get this virus and what happens if I do, maybe maybe you're in one of those age groups, or maybe you're in the physical, you're one of those at-risk people. My dad has COPD. He's in his 70s and he has COPD, which is a respiratory issue. And he's in that. So he hasn't been able to see any of his grandkids as a result of this for almost a year now. And so, but he, still has a steady persistence. He knows that there's going to be hope. He knows that there's going to be a day when we can, and I had this thought. I was talking to a client that when this COVID thing, when we're finally through this, going through this valley of the shadow of death, when we're finally through this and we're walking through, we're at the top of the mountain, we've come to the end of this journey with regards to the vaccines, whatever, and we can no longer have to wear these masks anymore. I can just foresee mask burning parties, where people are like, you know what, I've never liked these things, and I'm glad to be saying goodbye to it as a symbolic gesture of, you know what, look at what we've come through. Look at what we've overcome. So, I just kind of challenge you, like, were you steady, despite all these circumstances? Were you, were you persistent? Did you have a purpose? And so I guess maybe if you haven't discovered a purpose, I would challenge you to try and find a purpose, to find that steady part, to find that determination. It starts with a choice, and it could be, any measurable incremental change towards a positive outlook is a victory. And so here we are at the end of 2020, the beginning of 2021. We've all made it. So now we can look forward to 2021 and decide for ourselves, like, what's this year going to look like? In theological, I don't want to skip over this, but in theological terms, perseverance, the continuance of a state of grace to the end, leading to eternal salvation. And that brings me to my next slide. This is a little plaque that my sister made up for me when I graduated from graduate school in counseling. I got my master's degree in counseling. And this has become my new life verse, James 1:12. This is hanging on my wall just above my little office space. Blessed is the one who perseveres under trial, because having stood the test, that person will receive the crown of life that the Lord has promised to those who love him. And so, this might be a little hard pill to swallow, but think about this for a second, that as you persevere, God calls you blessed. We may have persevered through 2020. We may have to persevere through 2021, but God, through that process, God calls us blessed. Those who can put one foot in front of the other, who can get out of bed every day and find a reason to keep going. There may be days when you don't want to keep going, but you choose, because maybe this verse is going to speak to some of you. It's going to be your new life verse. It's like, blessed is the one who perseveres. My sister, she says perseverance is my superpower. Yeah, I don't know. It's just, I could tell you about some of the things I've been through in my life, some disappointments and losses and things like that. And there have been days when I've grieved, and I've grieved those losses, and there were days when I've suffered. And yet, I remember that God says that I'm blessed through all of that. Sometimes it's hard to accept. It's like, but, we keep persevering to attain that crown of life, so that we can, one day stand before God and say, he says, good, well done. You did a good job. Faithful servant, enter into your rest. We persevered through this life. We persevered through the times and the struggles. 2020 isn't going to be we're going to look back. A number of the young clients that I work with, they say, I tell them, it's like, you're going to be telling your grandkids about this year. It's going to be like those that lived through the Depression. It's going to be one of those things that, yes, it was tough. Yes, it was awful. But in a way, it also kind of bound us a little bit, that we all know what it was like to go through it. It's like a shared experience. And we can find shared encouragement in that. And so if you're a believer and we persevere through this, you're receiving a blessing. And God says it right here in James 1:12. And so I'm going to talk a little bit. I'm going to come back to this, but I want to move on to the next slide and talk a little bit about resiliency, which is the ability to recover readily from an illness. Okay, some of you might have had it and have recovered. It's strange. Some people have different responses to the virus, but they've recovered from it. They've become resilient. They've recovered from depression, or maybe they're recovering from anxiety, some form of adversity, or something along those lines. In the definition, I wanted to italicize and put in bold buoyancy. We think of buoyancy as floating in water. It's something that allows us to, a ship to float. I'm always amazed at aircraft carriers and large ships and how they can stay afloat. We have to be, when it comes to being resilient, it means being mentally and emotionally buoyant. We have to recognize that there are ups and downs to life, but there's an ebb and a flow to it. It comes and it goes. We don't have to be, yes, it may have a defining, some things may have a defining aspect but we don't have to be locked into these moments in time. We can move past 2020. We can move into 2021. We can move forward, and we can have with a sense of hope. And so I want to talk a little bit about hope, because I think that is incredibly important. But we have to be mentally and emotionally buoyant. And what does that mean? It's like, I like imagery, mental imagery. Picture yourself, it's like your ship sailing on the sea. Your ship, and you're going up and down. Your thoughts and your emotions are the sea. Your thoughts go up and down, your emotions go up and down. We don't have to be defined by them, but we continue to stay the course. We ebb and we flow. Our ships stay the course towards whatever plan, whatever purpose God has for us, whatever goal that that we've set for ourselves, that we're moving forward towards. We've decided in our hearts and in our minds that we're going to be emotionally buoyant. And so this is I like the imagery of this, is that you don't have to take, when you feel strong emotions, when you feel strong thoughts, you don't have to take possession of them. You don't have to be defined by them. You can just notice them. It's like, I'm feeling a little sad right now. Okay. Like the sadness, I'm just acknowledging that I feel sad. I'm just acknowledging that I'm angry over something. I'm acknowledging that something, that this particular issue happened in my life, that 2020, maybe I lost somebody as a result of the virus, and I'm not saying don't feel like you can't experience that, but just notice it so that it doesn't take over your life, that there's going to be an up and there's going to be a down. I'm doing down first. There's going to be a down and there's going to be an up. There's going to be up and down. There's an ebb and a flow to our lives, to our emotions, but we don't have to be defined by them. They don't have to take a hold of us. We notice them, we'll let them come and go, and we keep moving forward. So that's what I kind of feel like being emotionally buoyant is. And I hope that made sense, but that's essentially what resiliency is. And this is what I've been trying to kind of convey to some students that I work with, some young people, that, we have the ability to recover. We have the ability to overcome depression and the particular concerns. Some it may take longer than others. Let's just be honest. Resiliency might, you have to look for those small incremental changes. Some are larger, some are smaller, but just because you've set a goal for yourself and it seems insurmountable doesn't mean that you can't get it. It's like any step forward, any small determination to just get up in the morning, to, sit with your coffee, to read the paper, to do, to practice something, to do something, to call somebody, to write something out is, or just to acknowledge. It's like, what, today I'm not feeling so hot. Today I feel a little sad. Okay. That's totally normal. It's part of the human experience. But through 2021, we're going to set some goals. We're going to talk a little bit about resolutions. So if we can move on to the next slide. I'm not big on New Year's resolutions. I don't know about you. I've never really done them. They generally revolve around, I'm going to get in the gym. That's like the number one. It's like going to the gym. I'm going to lose weight. I'm going to get in shape. I'm going to do all these things. More gym memberships get signed in January than any other time of the year. I think that's the statistic. Sometimes we have these real lofty goals. And so a resolution, and I'm not knocking them. I've just never been a big fan of them. I've never really put it into place. But this year I did. And I want to talk about what I did. I kind of tweaked it a little bit. A resolution is a decision or determination to act, or it is an act of, and that's where I was mentioning before. It's like choosing to be determined, choosing to do something, like choosing those small incremental victories. Like that's a resolution. You're being resolved. You have resolved in your heart, in your mind, to set a goal, to work towards it. This year, instead of writing out a long New Year's resolution, I'm going to challenge you to pick one word to help you define what you would like this year to be like for you. I wish I could take credit for coming up with this idea. I think either a friend told me or I saw a YouTube video about it or something, but I thought, what a great idea. It's like, instead of just having, saying one thing, it's like, let's write down one particular word, that we would like to have this year kind of reflect or define. So if you wouldn't mind going to the next slide. Yeah. So, it could be anything. I wrote down a few suggestions here. It can be something that you want to do. Now, I fully realize that I wrote travel down, and it's like I know we can't really do that. At least like go. I mean, we can, but if you go into another country was a goal of yours. It's like, I mean, if you have 2 weeks to spend in a hotel in quarantine, I mean, they'll let you do it. But traveling to another city, traveling to another state, something along those lines. It could be forgiveness. I mean, I'm going to go through all of these. You may have some that's, as you begin to think and pray about this, that aren't on this list, but it could be something you want to do. You want to forgive somebody. Maybe there's something that's going on. You have a hurt, and it's you realize that 2021 is, you've held on to this hurt for long enough, and it's time to let it go. In 2021, forgiveness is going to be your word. You're going to work on forgiving that person and letting go of that hate and bitterness and anger and whatever else. Maybe serving. Like you want to try something new. You want to serve other people. You want to look for other ways to either serve in your church, serve in your community. Overcome. Okay, overcoming something. Maybe there's some a belief. Could be an addiction. Could be all manner of things. I'll leave it up to you to define it for yourself. But maybe there's something that you want to overcome, and maybe it's something that you wish to practice or develop. You want to love something. You want to love better. Maybe you've struggled with that. Maybe you have had a lot of bitterness in your heart, and you want to love other people a little better. Maybe that's been a struggle for you. Maybe it's been difficult to receive love. Maybe relatives, people care about you, but for whatever reason, it's been difficult for you to receive love from other people. And you kind of keep people, yes, we've had social distancing, but maybe you've been social distancing for a lot longer. And now it's time to learn to love again. Maybe you've been hurt, and it's time to try trusting people again. It could be something practical, like maybe you just like to paint. Maybe you painted when you were younger, and if this is a skill or a talent, this is a desire of your heart, or it's like, I'm going to try it. So you want to try something new. So maybe painting, okay? Maybe writing, journaling, as Madeline mentioned. Maybe you've got the next great American novel inside of you, and this is the year to let it out. Just start practicing. Just start writing your words. Just let your words flow. Maybe it's time to sing. Maybe you want to sing in church. Maybe it's been a while since you've actually sang, and maybe people who hear you sing, I've always told you have such a beautiful voice, but something has paralyzed you from sharing it. Maybe now's the time to step out and try that. Maybe it's just, you can just sing for the Lord. Just sing in your, where you are. Sing in the car. I do my best singing in the car, and then I sing in other people, and I'm thinking, wow, I sound a lot better in the car. So, maybe some of these words are going to be what's going to help you, kind of point you in the right direction to help define this year for you. Something could be something that you want to see or experience more of. Hope. We all could use nothing wrong with hope. We all need some hope. We all need some joy. Maybe you want to experience joy. You want to generate joy in somebody, give hope to somebody else. Maybe it's just calling up somebody and saying, hey, I've been thinking about you. It's like, it's been a while since we've talked. Do you need anything? Can I do anything for you? Some grace. Maybe it's receiving grace, seeing yourself as having God's grace, maybe giving grace to others. Maybe you've been maybe you have high expectations for everybody, and it frustrates you, and you realize that not everybody around you is perfect. Only one man has ever been perfect. So we got to give grace to other people. Maybe it's finding connection in some way, reconnecting either through FaceTime, through Zoom, through Teams, whatever it might be. Finding connection with other people, could be connection with a cause. And finally, just peace. Maybe you just need some peace. Maybe you've been struggling for so long, you don't know what peace looks like, and you want peace to be you're defining. You want to find it. You want to give it. So let's see. Alignment. The Lord gave it to me in the fall. Thank you, Andrea. Alignment. Okay. I'd love to hear more about that. And if you want to type that up, I'll be sure to share that. But whatever your word is, I would encourage you to write it down and keep it where you can see it. Write it down all the time. Put it in different places. I love sticky notes. I think that's my next slide. We can go ahead and go to the next slide. And I think this is our last slide. And oh, I'm sorry, Nick. I'm sorry. That was not the last one. But we'll stay here. We'll back up. Can we go to the abide one, the sticky note, and then we'll back up one. Thank you. So this is the sticky note that I keep on my computer, and my word for 2021 is to abide. And I was thinking, like, I could probably pray more, but I just realized that that's a standard one. It's like I just didn't want a standard resolution to pray more, which, as a Christian, as a believer, as a follower of Christ, I feel like, we're supposed to pray, but the word abide came to my mind as though this is what God wanted me to do. It's like just to acknowledge that I am to dwell in the presence of God a little more this year. And it just, maybe it's just acknowledging his presence, just acknowledging that he's always here. He's always present. He's always in my life. He's where I live. He's in my car. He's in my workplace. But that's a sticky note on my computer to remind me. I have one on my refrigerator. I might put one on the dashboard of my car or something like that, just to remind me. So I would encourage you, if you love sticky notes, I've got thousands of them. Try that. Put it where you'll see it, whatever your word is, just as a gentle reminder to look for that thing, to help you define that word. So let's back up to that last slide, and we'll end with that. Thank you for your patience, everyone. I'm going to leave you with this, Romans 5:1-5. And I highlighted the words that I thought would be good words for the year. Therefore, since we have been justified through faith, we have peace with God through our Lord Jesus Christ, through whom we have gained access by faith into this grace in which we now stand. Maybe we just need to stand. Maybe we've done everything that we can in our life, and we just got to stand and let God be God and do what he's got to do and do what he's going to do in our lives. And we boast in the hope of the glory of God. Maybe you want to experience the glory of God. You want to seek God and experience his glory. Not only so, but we also glory in our sufferings. That's a hard pill to swallow for a lot of us. Nobody wants to suffer, but suffer we do sometimes because we know that suffering produces perseverance. So our suffering can produce perseverance. So there can be a positive aspect to our suffering. We persevere. We choose to put one foot in front of the other and keep going. That perseverance generates character, and then that character generates hope, because through that process, we continually cry out to God. We can continually seek God. We abide in God. We reach out to God. We look for him, and our hope does not disappoint, because God's love has been poured out into our hearts through the Holy Spirit who has been given to us. And so I hope that this has been encouraging for you. I hope that this has been maybe a little challenging for some of you. Understand that, my heart is not to make you feel bad, but to, just, I want you to take 2020, learn what we can from it, look forward in hope in 2021. That, and if you've lost anything, lost anyone, you have my deepest sorrows, deepest regret. I'm so sorry, but I know that, through all this, something good can't come of it. That God says that we're blessed when we persevere. And if it's just seeing that you are blessed through all of this, maybe you don't feel it. Maybe it's going to take a while for that to sink in, but to acknowledge it, maybe that's the start. Maybe that's the first step to acknowledging that we are truly blessed when we persevere, and that's going to ultimately lead to a renewed sense of hope. And that's not going to disappoint you. So thank you for all of you for being here. Right at 8 o'clock. I don't know if I'm fine with, if you want to have any questions or you have to log out. Lori, if you want to jump in and say anything else to close us out, that's fine. I'll leave it up to you.
If anyone, thank y'all so much. My goodness, I really appreciate it. Does anyone have any questions that they want to ask before we leave? I want to respect that time. I had one question of what are some of the things that the three of you do briefly to care for yourselves and keep yourself grounded? What are some of the things that you go to when you find that you need that?
I just saw your question, so I was thinking about it, so I'm going to jump in. So one of my just quick grounding things that has been really helpful for me is actually, a DPT skill, which is I have a self-soothe kit. And that basically means in my house, I have a basket that inside of it has things that comfort me. And so there is something that smells really good for me. It's my favorite candle. There's something that is really comforting for me to touch. So there's a blanket that just feels really soft and comforting. I have like a playlist on my phone that's soothing to me. Pictures that I'll look at on my phone that are like, comforting for me, like favorite vacations or my dog or my son. And then I also have like, food that's like comforting to me. So when I need to be like grounded, when I'm having like one of those days where, like the world just kind of exploded on me, or I'm just feeling not myself, I have that basket that I kind of go to, and I'll like pull things out and, feel centered and feel comforted. So that's one of my favorite things. I also just, making sure you spend time doing things that make you feel like a person. So for me, that's cooking. And I always like have something that I bake every weekend that makes me feel like myself. So that's kind of another thing that I do.
Thank you. It's great.
I like to reach out. My counselor is my sister. She's like, she and my brother-in-law are like two of my favorite people in the world, and their kids. And so they don't live. I moved from Alabama for the job for Summit, but also to be closer to them. So they live like within a few minutes of me. And during the height of the pandemic, I have a fairly large family. We would do FaceTime and everything. But I like to visit with them quite a bit, have dinner with them. I mean, me and my 16-year-old nephew, we're like thick as thieves. We're just two peas in a pod. I love mentoring him, and things that I like to do for fun. I practice a couple of instruments, like guitar, bass guitar. I really love making noise. So that's my thing. And quiet time. I mean, just kind of, I live in a semi-wooded area, not a lot of traffic or anything like that. And it's just kind of really peaceful. I see deer, I see hawks, I see families, flocks of blue jays and cardinals, and every morning outside my window. And so I find that very peaceful and centering. So I kind of, I look for that time. I appreciate that time. So those are just kind of some of the things that I do.
Throw mine out. I'll throw mine out real quick though, as potential things that you guys can do. Baking, same as Brittany, that's something that I've really been trying to do, which has been good in terms of comfort too, because then I get to eat them, whatever I make. Playing with my dog is a big one too. And then too, some of like the grounding, also self-care, I guess, in a way. Heating pads, that's been something, especially in this cold. Do not discount the benefit of a heating pad, or like on your shoulders. And then even though it's cold, bundling up and just taking a walk outside is like, it's so nice to sometimes feel that fresh air and get out of your house and try something new and hear those birds, like Max is saying, just changing the scenery a little bit.
And massages are good too.
Well, yeah.
Great. Thank y'all so much. Anyone else have any questions before we go?
I wanted to acknowledge Andrea. Just thank you for that definition. Your what she wrote is for alignment. Means being cognizant of what God is doing and aligning thoughts, words, and actions accordingly. So thank you for that. I appreciate finding that.
Thanks for the acknowledgement. That's kind.
All right. Anyone else have anything that they want to ask before we go? Thank you all for being here, and thank you, Max and Madeline and Brittany. I really appreciate your time, especially after a long day, and just really grateful for you all, and hope that we're all able to see each other soon. And everyone, be sure to take care of yourselves, and we'll wrap up.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for coming.
Thank y'all so much.
Good to see you.
Thank you.
We're very lucky to have our partnership with you at the church.